Hey, it's Will actually, and yeah, of course I have a podcast. Welcome to All the King's Voices, where I interview your favorite drag kings about performance, identity, and what it means to be a king. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, and if you're not, head over to YouTube and do that so you can actually see your favorite performers on the screen. But if you just want to listen to the podcast, you can find us on whatever podcast channel you are using, whatever podcast app. Just make sure that you go over and rate and review us so that other people can find the podcast. So today's guest is ZZ Topz, and ZZ Topz is a gender-bending drag king hailing from Madison, Wisconsin. They've performed all over the state of Wisconsin and the Midwest. They're a rock and roll stripper who strives to create theatrical performances with enthralling looks. I would say they do more than strive. I think they totally succeed, but that's just me. They use their masters in fine arts to create costumes and stylized makeup. They're the reigning Mr. 5 Nightclub, a bar title in Madison, Wisconsin, who uses their platform to create space for new kings and AFAB performers in the drag community. I'll also say that I consider ZZ a friend and find them absolutely fucking amazing. So let's go meet them.
Yeah, hi, my name's ZZ Topz. I am known as the bulge that goes bump in the night. My wife gave me that tagline. It's the best tagline.
It's so good.
I am a drag king from Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes, an amazing drag king from Madison, Wisconsin. You're like the drag king. So I guess that's kind of where I want to start, if that's cool with you. So how did you find kinging, and like, what was the king scene like here? And for disclosure, I'm also in Madison, Wisconsin, although I am not from here. So, yes.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing femme burlesque for like 2 years. And I never like totally vibed with it, but I just kept doing it because I was like, yeah, this is the thing people are doing. My wife's a burlesque performer and producer, Mercury Stardust, and so I was kind of like, yeah, this is what I should be doing. And we had been having conversations about gender, and I was just kind of like, hey, I want to try drag. I just want to try it. And I got in drag, and we went out on the town, and I was like, yeah, okay. Now what do I do with this?
That is the question.
Yeah. Like, okay, this feels cool. What do I do? And so there's an open competition here called Category is on Tuesday nights. So you pick 2 songs. I picked 2 songs. I did 2 acts, and one of them was to Horns by Bryce Fox, which I still do. It's like an act that I take all over the place. And I won that week. And then I got to move on to the finals for the month, and then I won the finals, and I got booked in a show. And then just from there, it kind of snowballed from 0 to 60 really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the king sing here, I hadn't seen too many drag kings. There have been drag kings in the past. There was a drag king troupe here for a while. There's a troupe in Milwaukee, but not in Madison. And there weren't a lot of active kings at the time. Mm-hmm. And no one, even the kings that were here, were not really getting booked very often. And I wasn't seeing the kind of drag I liked, which is really like crazy and over the top and rock and roll. And so I
couldn't tell.
Oh, yeah, if you can't tell by my outfit at all. So I kind of turned to like YouTube. I watched that like 1 hour and a half long Damien Deluxe makeup tutorial where he's just like backstage, and kind of like was consuming as much online media as I could to kind of develop myself, and it just kind of took off here.
Yeah. That's cool. So when you kind of like turned to the online, like what were you looking for? Like what were you looking to see?
I was looking to see, like, I liked to watch interviews of kings having a conversation. There was like one king panel at DragCon that had like Landon Cider and other kings on it that had been doing this a long time, and I listened to what they had to say and tried to like take away from that. And I was looking for like, I'd never contoured my face before. I'd never done like anything, so any sort of information. I found Instagram was great for like inspiration because everyone's posting crazy looks all the time, and I just started following a bunch of drag kings and just consuming as much information as I could. And I found Drag King History, which I know talked about on this show before, and that was a wonderful resource as well.
Yeah. So then you look around Madison, and Madison has a really big drag scene from what I've experienced, at least. And not like big in terms of like, you know, there's a million performers, but it seems to be like a fairly comprehensive scene, pretty established, but drag being like queen, right?
Right.
So kind of when you're looking around, like, are you thinking to yourself, like, I would like to help create more kings here, or like I want to find a space for myself? Like, what was kind of the next thing after you started contouring, basically?
Yeah, so what happened was I started performing, and then a bunch of other like AFAB performers who were already in the scene, who were in the burlesque community, were like, hey, I want to do this too. This is really cool. I like what you're doing. And so I actually sat down with like a handful of performers, drag names being like Daddy Don't Give a Damn, Cash Johnson, Matt Carter, and we were all decided to grow together and try kinging. And so they all debuted kind of at different times, but we just were kind of like a collective and helped each other and figured out how to get bookings and what to do as far as our style of drag, what we wanted to do here. And yeah.
And thus became the House of Topz.
Thus became, yeah. We're called the House of Topz because technically I started first. But we're not like a traditional drag house in that there's a hierarchy, because that's I've been doing drag maybe like 4 months longer than Daddy. So like it's just a collective of performers who were performing in other avenues and decided to try kinging, and, you know, kind of latched on to being drag kings.
That's cool. Yeah. So you were performing in all other avenues. You've mentioned burlesque. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of like where you came from performance-wise, and then how you're using it in drag now?
Sure, yeah. You know, I was sort of a theater kid growing up. I did a lot of musicals, but I was always like a background character. I'm 5'8", and I played a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz, which I still think is hilarious. But that kind of dwindled off because, you know, I'm a very sort of independent artsy person. So working like with groups of people for someone else's ideal is not my thing. Mm-hmm. I went to art school for 7 years. I have a bachelor's and a master's in fine arts, specifically in jewelry and metalsmithing, but I did a lot of costuming and like weird contemporary video art type stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, and then I started, a lot of my performing actually ties into sex work, so I started doing fetish shows when I turned 21, like a week after I turned 21. I was like, get me in this. And I did that for a while, back when I was living in Ohio. Then I moved back to Madison, and I found like pole. I used to do lyra. I'm kind of taking a break from the aerial training, but I focused on pole, and I was an exotic dancer for 3 years. And so a lot of that kind of just shaped my drag and moved into my drag. My drag's very sexual. I definitely throw on pleasers like half the time. Yeah. And I've kind of drawn from those experiences into my performances now.
Yeah, so it's super interesting, just because, you know, talking to different kings, everyone's has a different kind of like definition of what makes a king, or what a king looks like, or what masculinity is, or how you perform it. And especially coming from like aerial and exotic dance and fetish and burlesque as well, right? Like you're drawing on a bunch of different art forms that often get interpreted in a very specific feminine way. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so for some kings, that means like kind of like eschewing all of that and being like, nope, don't want it. Gotta be like, can't move, you know, no hips. I'm a king, right? And for other kings, it means like, no, I take that, but somehow I make it masculine. So like, I'm curious because I mean I've seen you perform, but our audience may not have. So like, what does that look like? How do you make this king performance versus anything else that you've done?
Yeah, and I've actually found that like my king performances are the most like naturally me. Um, I have a lot of pent up rage and like sexual aggression, so a lot of my performances are like hard, fast music, um, really aggressive like arms and body movements, but then also bringing in like okay, but also I'm gonna twerk and like heel clack on the floor. And so it's like a combination of like masculine aggressive movements and really sensual feminine movements. My favorite comments are when people are like, I'm sexually confused. I'm like, great.
Yeah, you did my job.
Yeah, but I also go kind of like I do a lot of cosplay in drag, which I take as like if there was like a fetish fan fiction about this character, what would they be doing? Um, and just kind of experiment with different aesthetics too, and blending masks.
Oh, lost you for a second. Sorry about that. You still there? Okay.
No worries.
Yeah. So sorry. So you were like blending, I think was where you left off.
Yeah. Blending like physical movements that are deemed masculine or feminine and aesthetics. So like a suit but with pleasers, or like a corset and a jacket, or you know, like combining things. And I don't really think about it. It's not like I'm going, this is feminine and this is masculine, and put them together. There are things that I naturally enjoy that happen to fall on like different sides of the spectrum.
So what is a drag king to you? The easy question. This is the easy question.
I think for me is like being somewhere masculine of center.
Okay.
So whatever that means, but like you could be a millimeter away from the center and still be a drag king, or you can be like super far away male impersonator level. I kind of align somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's been really important to like embrace the masculinity and the masculine traits that I already have, and just kind of amplify those.
Gotcha.
And kind of take back some of that power over my own gender identity.
Yeah. So how does your own gender identity like play into your drag?
It's kind of crazy, because I was living like a normal cis woman life, and my partner is trans, and we had been having all these conversations about gender, I think I mentioned earlier, but I literally performed once as a king and went, oh shit, I'm not a woman. I gotta figure this out. And I use just the umbrella term non-binary to describe myself. I feel like it's the most fitting just because it is a broad term, and I don't feel particularly like anything gender-wise. And it made me realize I never have, like I never felt comfortable in women-only spaces, and I never felt like a trans man, and I'm somewhere in this like weird gray space, and I think that really comes out in my drag, but it also, like my drag helped me discover that about myself, so they're really aligned with each other.
Yeah, like what was that moment when you're like, oh shit, like what, how did, was it like a mirror moment, or was it just like?
It was totally like performing for the first time in drag. Because like I had done, you know, I got dressed up once or twice, and I was like, okay, this is like fun and whatever. And I performed, and I went, I'm not nervous. I feel totally comfortable. These movements are natural. This is like a normal place for me to be. Oh shit. why is this normal? And my brain kind of imploded. And I just kind of like softly came out. I was just like, hey guys, if you could maybe use they, them pronouns, that'd be cool. And it sort of shifted into being sort of a big proponent for non-binary and gender non-conforming people here.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about how your title too has helped with that? You mentioned it's Mr. 5, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that, because people may not know the significance?
Sure. So 5 Nightclub is like my home bar here in Madison. You've also been there.
It's such a good bar.
I love 5. And the 5 pageant's a bar pageant as part of like a state system, but it's also like a really respected bar pageant in Wisconsin. It's kind of like prestigious bar title for a dive bar. And I ran just because a bunch of people were like, hey, you should run. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. And I ended up winning the title, and I'm the first AFAB person to win a title in 20 years. And this is even though, like, so the way 5 works is some pageants have, like, gender requirements, and 5 doesn't.
Right.
For, like, any of their categories, right? Which is awesome. But somehow in the whole system of things, it's never happened before. And so I'm the first king and the first AFAB person and the first non-binary person to hold a title there. It's crazy when you like say that out loud. And I won that title like 6 months into drag, and crazy. But it's also given me a lot of like visibility in town. I've had a lot of booking opportunities and big opportunities to showcase like gender nonconformity and drag kings, and we've seen like a huge uptick in AFAB performers here, whether it be queens or kings or people in between. And I think representation of someone you can look up to be like, hey, this is an attainable goal, because it felt like it wasn't an attainable goal when I ran. It was me, a lovely trans man by the name of Trigger, who's from Minnesota, and then like 5 cis men running for this title. So yeah, I think the visibility is really important, because I think if you have like visible representation of like someone like you, even if they're not exactly like you, those goals are attainable, and you can hold like a prestigious position within a community. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. I didn't even have to do much. It just kind of like sparked a bunch of performers feeling finally comfortable, like they do belong on the stage, which I think is really great.
Yeah. I mean, even so, I just moved here recently, and I've seen so many kings or people who are like AFAB performers who show up. I mean, at least on the 5 stage, that's where where I tend to perform the most, right? But seeing people backstage who are performing, it's just like, oh, this is just normal, right? But apparently it's new, and that's so freaking cool.
It's changed, like, it's gone from like no drag kings to like a ton of drag kings in like a little over a year. It's kind of amazing. Yeah.
It's awesome. And so you produced 2 drag king shows last year.
Yeah, so I had an all drag king show. Mm-hmm. Which we brought in some outside performers, like my boy Ty Torres.
Mm-hmm. It was such a fun show.
And a bunch of local kings. And then I've been doing some all AFAB shows, so like AFAB queens and drag kings, which you were a part of.
Yes.
Then we were supposed to have another one. Wah wah. Yeah. But yeah, and so that was to showcase, like, I think it's important that there's king representation, but I also want to showcase AFAB queens. Mm-hmm. And so having a space with only like AFAB bodies was really amazing because that never happened at five. Um, so and I think having that title gave me that opportunity to do these shows and try to give back to performers in the community. And I always would give like one or two spots to like a new performer I saw at the open stage or whatever, so they could get stage time that they weren't getting. Because it's still hard to get booked if you're not a drag queen. So
For sure.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to break old patterns, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not possible though, which is the important thing.
It is possible. It's a lot of work, but it's possible.
So much work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was such a fun. The All AFAB show that I was a part of was it was the holiday show, right? So December.
Yeah, it was Christmas because you did like some Hanukkah stuff and we had a Krampus act and
yeah, that
it was time.
Yeah, that was a party. So okay, so when you're in the community now, you're also doing workshops and things about like how to be a drag king. So when you're interacting, especially with newer performers, how do you kind of explain to them what kinging is, or how do you help them get started? Or, obviously everyone's going to, everyone wants and needs something different from drag, but kind of how are you helping to guide people?
Yeah, I mean, I found that like I've done a couple workshops and I honestly prefer like one-on-one conversations, I think, over having multiple people. My workshops have mostly been like, here's how to contour, here's what a binder is, here's a packer, like here's some practical information, here's some resources, that kind of thing. But I've met with a bunch of baby kings for like coffee. I'll get a message that's like, hey, I want to start. And I'm like, let's go get coffee. And we usually talk for like 2 hours or something. I like to hear people's motives. So like why you want to start kinging. Do you have an idea of what you want to represent on stage? And kind of work through personal ideas rather than like projecting because like, I don't want a bunch of baby me's.
What? You mean you don't want just everyone to do the same thing you do? Come on.
No, but I think it's important to kind of like dig into people's brains about like why they're doing drag and what they want to get out of drag and how you can help them represent those things through like aesthetics or through music or through narrative. I think it's really personal to every individual person, so it's kind of hard to have like a blanket statement about like this is how you should be a drag king.
Yeah, it's so interesting, especially too like like for me, I like could care less about the makeup. I'm like, let me just get on stage and like do a very specific, highly choreographed act. Like that's my thing, right?
Yeah,
but
we are so different.
Like literally opposite, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, we can be in the same show and like for the same audience, and like they'll both go, oh, or they'll look at us both and say, oh, that's a drag king, right? Which is super fun. Like,
yeah. So, like, have people you look up to, but also like figuring out what works best for you and how you can be successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless it's lip syncing, you should always be good at lip syncing.
Yes, lip syncing is probably a good skill to learn if you're planning on performing drag.
Yeah, it just is. I mean, I feel like you don't like your strongman act is like no lyrics, right?
Right.
So you could do like no lip syncing, but I always think that like it's a really good strong skill to have if you're doing drag.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, a lot of my acts actually, especially the ones with no lyrics, are for burlesque, right?
Right.
Like, the idea is not to lip sync because I didn't start doing drag to be a drag king per se. I was a burlesque dancer and I like felt like I was clawing out of my own skin performing as a woman. So when I had the opportunity, and I say as a woman, and then so when I came up with this character while I was doing a one-woman show, and I was like, it'd be really fun is if I didn't act as this douchebag. And
Right.
so he just became my burlesque male persona, like my boylesque persona. And like I actually didn't start doing drag until later. Like the idea of like pageants and lip sync and all of that was completely foreign to me because I was a burlesque dancer. Totally different.
Oh, totally. Totally. And I came from burlesque too, but also I just realized I'm really good at lip syncing. So, and also like my goal I'm not a super narrative performer, so my goal is always to like convey a specific emotion or an unknowable emotion. So like trying to get the audience to feel a certain way. And I think you can do that really well with like facial expressions and lyrics. So it just kind of like naturally made sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And like, I mean, as someone who has seen your performances, I think you're very good at that, especially because, you know, you have a sense of musicality and a sense of like how to interact with the audience or like make them feel seen too. You know, whereas like a lot of my acts are like, please don't hand me dollars. I have choreography, please. I don't.
Those acts too, though. Because like I think part of why I was performing so much and part of how I got so like well respected so quickly is because I was doing drag shows and burlesque shows. Mm-hmm. And so I have acts that like I don't do at drag shows, but I do at burlesque shows because they're fully choreographed and like I can't take dollars. And then I have acts I do drag shows that are a little looser, and still partially choreographed because I can't help myself.
It's good. It's good to have some choreography, some idea of where you're going. You know.
Yeah, I'm not that good at improv that I can have nothing nailed down. Yeah. I do shows with queens who are backstage who are like, I haven't decided what song I'm going to do. And I'm like, I've been practicing for 3 weeks.
Oh my God. That makes me so hats off to anyone who can do that. But like,
I know.
When people are like,
that.
That is not a skill I understand.
Me.
Yeah. Literally, like, if my music isn't already on the thumb drive, I'm not coming to the show. That's just how that is.
If I'm not in face like 5 hours before the start of the show, it's not happening.
No. I know. It's funny, too, because especially now that I'm doing more drag, right? Like, there's the apocalypse competition here in Madison that I've been doing where you have to have a new costume every 2 weeks and a new act. And it is so hard because like for me, I'll spend 3 months rhinestoning a onesie pajama set to be a giant hot dog. And like, there's very like intention and thought behind it, but it's forced me to be a little bit more improvisational and on the spot, which is kind of cool.
It's kind of good. And that's actually, I noticed that too when I shifted, because I would spend like 3 months handcrafting like custom costumes that were all hand painted and like whatever when I did burlesque. And now I'm like building multi-piece wardrobes and just like throwing stuff together. And I have like when I did burlesque, I did 3 acts in 2 years. And now I have like acts I've done once, but acts I've done multiple times. I have like 25 in a year. And so like just to keep up, and I feel like I don't even keep up with some of the queens and how fast but it's a different working process.
For sure. It really is. And also just in terms of like opportunities and shows and themes and all of that, right? Like you may not necessarily need to have that level of, wardrobe and act creations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I feel like because I've been like traveling to different places more, and I feel like you can just like, I know this act is good, I'm gonna take it there, and not worry about doing new stuff on new stages as often.
Yeah.
I do my new stuff at 5.
Yeah.
Feel it. And then take it other places.
Yeah. So what has it been like to be a traveling king? What have you experienced, and what's different about other scenes that you've been a part of, or that you've like interacted with versus here?
Yeah. Like, they don't know what drag kings are. Like, I'll go to like small towns in Wisconsin, and yeah, and then I'm like the first drag king they've seen in a long time, or and those situations can sometimes be really good, There's a wonderful show in Dubuque, Iowa I did where I was like the first king a bunch of people had seen, but they were really nice. And they were like, "You're awesome." And I was like, "Cool." And then I've done shows in small towns where like I get misgendered on the microphone all night and no one's expecting a king to come out and everyone looks at me weird and I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The shows I've done with other kings have all been great. I think like the only thing for me is I'm not traditionally masculine, so I think a lot of times if there's like established king scenes, there's like more tradition than we have here.
Yep.
Because like we're kind of building a new scene from scratch, and so I don't feel like I necessarily fit in, but still received well. It's just like different going to different places.
Yeah. I mean, even just moving from San Francisco to here, like, it's interesting to see like different styles and like how people interpret what it means to be a king and like, yeah, how audiences receive it as well, you know?
I mean, and it's now when I perform in Madison, it's like, oh my God, it's ZZ. But when I started, it was like, what the fuck is happening? Who is this person? Why are they on stage? I don't understand why they have titties and a dick. I'm so confused. And that was like, it took a while for people to like grasp what I was doing here, that because it wasn't so binary. And now it's like normal. And I think the burlesque scenes helped a lot with that here.
Sure.
in normalizing like gender nonconforming identities.
I would 100% agree with that. Yeah, the burlesque scene here too, that was one of the things that made me so excited about moving to Madison in the very first place. Mercury basically convinced me when I came here to visit schools. And I mean, I know that she's done a ton to like really make Madison a safe space for that, you know, for burlesque, for gender nonconforming people to feel safe, right? And to build audiences that also create those safe spaces for performers. So I think it's neat that you've been able to kind of translate that out from the burlesque scene into the drag world. And we're starting to see more of that. And we're starting to see a lot more queens too. Like, I really want to shout out the queens who are like helping create those spaces now as well, you know?
Oh, totally. There's definitely some queens who are like very vocal advocates for like our subsect of the community, which I think is really wonderful. There's queens who aren't, but whatever.
I mean, you're gonna get all types, right?
You know, but we've really found like a wonderful like family of really supportive people who are trying to like learn and grow and understand gender in more nuanced ways, and give opportunities to people who weren't getting opportunities before with the established power structure. So like it's getting better. It's definitely like a baby, it's not a baby drag scene, but it's a baby like non-conforming scene.
Yeah.
Alternative scene for sure.
Yeah. And it's cool that it's growing, you know, and I'm just so sad that like 5 is closed right now because I feel like
yeah, no, it is like, and it's that bar is such a special place for so many people. Like when I was 16, I forget what day of the week it was, but they used to have a 16 and up night when I was in high school because I grew up around here, but I went to school in Ohio, came back. But I used to go there with all my baby queer friends, and none of us really knew we were queer yet, but we used to just go to 5 to like hang out and dance. And I got my first vibrator there. I won it in a contest while I was underage.
Wonderful.
I don't think Dave was the owner, but and it's gone through a lot of transitions. It's been around for a really long time. But Dave, the owner, is really wonderful and really accepting. My favorite moment with him is we did like a Freaky Friday show where we swapped drag, and I was a pageant drag queen. I did the whole thing, and I felt good about it. It was so surreal. But Dave came up to me and was like, "You did great. I want ZZ back." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." That was a very like validating experience. It's like I could do this and do what is expected, but people value me for who I am, and that place is so special.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually, so when I performed as Lydia, Dave didn't recognize me. I'm still new, so
yeah.
You know, but he was like, "Hey, great job!" Like, had no, like, I posted on Facebook that I was like, "Hey, I had so much fun being Lydia," and he was like, "Wait, what?"
yeah. I
was like, "Yep, nope, I'm Will. That's
also me.
Yeah, also me, just way more makeup than this."
Yeah, no, and he's a really wonderfully supportive person, and he has conversations with people, trying to actively improve that space and make it a safer space for everybody, which I think is why so many of us love that bar like so much.
Yeah.
Also, there really very many other performing venues in town anymore, or like drag shows at other venues. Even like a year ago, there was like a show at the Art Inn, which doesn't exist anymore. There was an alternative show at the Crucible, which I don't think is running really anymore. There was Plan B, and then there was Prism, which is the same bar rebranded, and the night closed. So like a lot of even in like the year that I started, a lot of the queer spaces and shows have kind of shut down, and it makes me a little. It's great for Five because everyone loves Five.
Yeah.
Things who are like, I didn't even think to go anywhere else. You know, when I'm like, reach out to these people at other bars, and they're like, what other bars? You know.
Yeah.
The scene's growing, but we're gonna hit like a weird capacity thing that's gonna happen till we can start making more spaces. So hopefully that'll happen.
Yeah, fingers are crossed. And in the meantime, we have Facebook.
Yeah.
So much Facebook. Oh my lord, there is so much Facebook drag happening right now.
Yeah, it's a lot. You can get your fill, for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit, speaking of like Facebook, which then logical leap to like Facebook, Instagram, like the actual like makeup part of it. Because ZZ is like such a like painted king. Like, like how do you like conceptualize your looks, or like where do you get this inspiration to look the way that you do versus somebody who's like more like passing male or whatever, or you know, because you have some very like, everyone needs to go check out ZZ's Instagram. Some of your looks are like, yeah, it's just great.
Yeah. So when I started, I was painting really like trying to be more traditionally masculine. My contour was harsh as fuck. You can go back and look at those old photos of me, and they're not great, but I'm leaving them up so you can see the growth. But when I started performing kind of a little bit more on the masculine side, and when I started like allowing myself to bring like feminine elements in, I started doing different stuff with my face. And it took me a while to figure out like my face, because I was like referencing other people, and I forgot how tiny my head is, and I can't shove like 500 things on my face. But I usually just take like a color palette that I want, and I think of myself as more of like a demon, siren, creepy entity than like a human man. So I kind of exaggerate features that are a little bit different. Like I always give myself under eye circles and kind of like make it look like I have bruises, or you know, snake skin or something a little bit farther out there. But really it's all just play. Yeah. It's all just like taking all my color theory from like art school freshman year and like putting it on my face.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My look is, how can I get through this so I can go on stage? I have no patience for palettes. I'm like, what is art? I don't know. Give me a mustache. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's totally cool too, though. I think it's fun. Yeah. So like for me, it's part of the fun is like you know, oh, I'm going to contour my face in red. I'm going to contour my whole body in red. And I'm just going to, like transform into something otherworldly. I take a lot of inspiration. Like, you can see my giant manga bookshelf behind me and like comic books. I'm a huge nerd. So like, I love fantasy and sci-fi and horror. And I kind of draw from those images versus like real human men.
Because what even is that anyway?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know what it is either. But I don't want to look particularly masculine, even though I have masculine features. I think I would rather look more like an entity.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a cool definition.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about like, people are finding drag, and they're going, okay, I think I'm a king, or I want to be a king. I want to learn more about it. I want to like start a scene here or join a scene here or whatever. Like, what do you tell that person who's like, I'm excited. Now what?
Yeah. I always think that like performing should be like number one. So like aesthetics, I think, go along with that. Like whatever your aesthetic is can enhance your performance. But I think working on, like either a narrative through a performance or conveying a story, or like what I do, which is just like take a song that makes me feel weird and try to make everyone practicing like at home, practicing at open stages, just like actually focusing on the performance will get you far. And networking, because that's a reality of drag in general, or performing in general, is that people, you get booked because they know you. If you don't know people, they're not going to book you because they don't know you.
Right.
And I would just go to shows in drag and introduce myself to show producers, and I would message. If there was a show I wanted to be in, I'll just send a video of like an act and be like, hey, what you're doing is really cool. Can I be a part of it? And really like putting yourself out there, but you have to have like a strong performance foundation, and then, go from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing, because I think for a lot of people, it's like drag means so many different things. And for some people, it's like, I just want to be here for the Instagram likes, right? Like I'm all about the aesthetics, right? Or it's like, it's gender affirming, and like, I just want to feel this way or look this way or be this way. And the performance aspect isn't that important. But when you're thinking about like, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Like if you're thinking about doing drag on a stage at a drag show, you got to be good at lip sync, right? Like, yeah. You have like, to be able to perform.
my trade secret to lip sync is that I do it every single time I'm in my car driving anywhere.
Yes. Yes.
I have like multiple playlists for different things. I have like established acts and future acts and just songs I like. Even songs I'm never going to do in drag, I practice lip syncing to. And it's just like it's a skill that I think people take for granted. They're like, oh, I can move my mouth.
Right. Watermelon.
Yeah. Can you move your mouth really exaggerated so the audience can read your facial expressions? How do you control for like closing your eyes, or like, hand movements incorporated? So like, I'm that weirdo where like someone parks next to me, I'm like this in my car. But I mean, I think if you want to perform, then focus on the performance. If you don't want to perform, that's fine too. Yeah. If you want to get in a drag for fun, or get in a drag and take cool pictures, that's also valid. Yeah. I just get a lot of kings who are like, I want to perform more. And I'm like, then you work on your performance. That should be your focus. Yeah.
Amen to that. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you're like, yes, we have to cover this as a king, as a mentor, as a performer, especially talking about maybe other crossover performances? I'll leave that open to you.
Yeah. Not particularly. I always love, I think, bringing other skills into drag. is always something that I'm a big fan of. I do pole in drag,
So fun.
which is super fun. I think I linked a video of me doing pole in drag. But, you know, there's like Ty Torres who plays his saxophone in drag, which is like swoon material.
The first time I saw that, I almost died. I was not prepared.
You're never prepared. I mean, you know, people like you who bring burlesque and chair and acro, like I won my Mr. Five talent by doing acro chair. And I think like it's really awesome to see people take their natural skills that they've already like spent a lot of time working on and incorporate that into something new. And I think that's what a lot of it is about, like getting better. It's like taking what you already have and like adding on to it instead of trying to start from scratch, from nothing. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and that's what's so great about drag, right? Is it's like it doesn't just have to be I'm standing on stage and lip syncing. It can be like, well, in my other life, I play the saxophone, right? Or I know how to pole dance, or I decided to teach myself to throw myself off of a chair because that's just the thing that I wanted to do, right? These are skills I developed outside, and you can say, and then I can do that while lip syncing.
Right. I was lip syncing while pole dancing is one of the hardest things I've done. I wanted to like, and I'm a heavy smoker, so I was like ready to pass out after I do that. But yeah, I mean, I've met a baby king who was like, well, I play bassoon. I was like, fuck yeah, king playing bassoon. Get on stage, like, do that weird stuff. If you have a theatrical background, pull from theater. Like, I think it's important to know that everyone has things in their life that can lend themselves to drag. And it's just like pinpointing what those things are and how to incorporate them into your drag.
Amen. I love it. Well, cool. Well, thanks for sharing your story and your thoughts and your experience with us, ZZ. I really appreciate it.
Of course, it was super fun.
Yeah. All right. It's nice to get to actually see you, even though we don't live that far from each other.
I know.
This pandemic.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you liked it, why not rate, review, and subscribe wherever you feel like rating, reviewing, and subscribing. If you want to learn more about today's guests, head over to facebook.com/kingsvoicespod or check out the comments or the description in the YouTube channel, King's Voices Pod. There I'll post all the links to everything you want to know about today's guest, and you can find them from there. If you are interested in becoming a guest yourself, then why not shoot me an email at willxullydrag@gmail.com or shoot me a message on Facebook at facebook.com/kingsvoicespod. All right, so that's it for today. And remember, keep your toxic masculinity to yourself, but share your drag with the world.